Thank you and welcome back. Welcome to the show today. The topic today is Between Cross and Crescent, a Christian and Muslim perspective on Malcolm and Martin. And of course we have with us to talk about this perspective on Malcolm and Martin, Dr. Al-Hadid, who is the chairperson of the Department of Africana Studies at Tennessee State University. And with Dr. Al-Hadid is Dr. Louis V. Baldwin, who is a professor in the Department of Religious Studies at Vanderbilt University. And of course, let me welcome you, Dr. Al-Hadid, as well as Dr. Baldwin, to the show this morning. And to say how delighted we are to have the two of you here, and to also inform our audience that this certainly is not the first time that the two of you have been with us either collectively or individually. And looking back over some of the things that we've done, I can recall excellent shows from the two of you. Dr. Al-Hadid, I remember quite recently we did something on the African American in the 21st century, which way for the future, as well as the African in the New World. And of course, Dr. Baldwin, you came to us a long time ago with James Earl Ray's wife, I think, and you did that assassination on Dr. Martin Luther King. Right, so both of you, as well as several other talks about Dr. Martin Luther King. And so both of you have excellent credentials, and I know that you have excellent information for our audience this morning. Dr. Al-Hadid, let's start with you by having you to give us some information about your background, your education, and of course Dr. Baldwin will do the same thing, and then we'll get into the book that the two of you have collaborated on and would like to talk about today.
Well, I'll start with the most immediate thing. Is I'm chair of the Department of Africana Studies at Tennessee State University, a department that was created in 1994, and I was one of the architects and one of the co-founders of that department. And I went to graduate school, University of California, Santa Barbara. While I was in graduate school, I had an opportunity to study in Nairobi, Kenya, and it was at that point, in 1969, that I embraced the religion of Islam, and then from that point, made the pilgrimage to Mecca and came back to the United States with a whole different worldview. And since that time, I have studied very carefully Islam and Pan-Africanism, and also the plight of the historically African-American colleges. I graduated from Alabama State University in Montgomery, Alabama, and attended George Washington Carver High School, also in Montgomery, Alabama.
Very good. And Dr. Baldwin?
Yes, I grew up in Alabama. As you well know, Dr. Al-Hadid and I are from Alabama. And I attended Talladega College and got a BA in history in 1971. And at that point, I thought I had a call to the ministry, and so I decided to go to seminary. And I went to Crowes in the fall of '71 and received 2 master degrees, one Master of Art, one Master of Divinity, in 1973 and 1975, respectively. Also, as a student, I had the opportunity to participate in student demonstrations in the 1960s, and that had a great influence on my decision to become a scholar, to become a professor. So I left Talladega and went to Crowes Seminary, and from there, I decided to pursue a PhD at Northwestern University in the history of religions with an emphasis on Christianity. And I received the PhD in 1980, and since that time I've been teaching and writing, mostly on Dr. King. I have 3 books on Dr. King. I'm primarily interested in the history of African American religion and culture, and also the history of civil rights crusades. Particularly the modern civil rights crusade.
Very good. And of course, I think the two of you have collaborated, as we said earlier, on a book, Between Cross and Crescent. And let's have the two of you give us some information relative to that book, and we, of course, will have an opportunity following the first commercial break to get into some detail in reference to it. But let's have the two of you sort of give us an overview in terms of what the audience can expect from such a publication, and the efforts that have gone into it, and the things that you believe to be important in terms of bringing this as a scholarly work in front of our audience this morning. Let's start off with you, Dr. Al-Hadid, and of course Dr. Baldwin. I'm almost sure that we'll be interrupted, but we'll pick it up at the end of the first segment.
Yes, I think my involvement started in 1985. It was at that time that I created a concept at Tennessee State University called the Great Debate. And in that forum, we debate current issues from the perspective of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and try to achieve a dialectical synthesis. So it was about that time that I met Dr. Baldwin, and as fate would have it, he was also trying to bring some type of synthesis and some type of common understanding to Dr. King and Malcolm X. And so as he was working at Vanderbilt in terms of writing his books and doing a scholarship, and I was working at Tennessee State organizing the great debates, he and I just kept talking, exchanging ideas, and he would come to the great debates. I would go to his classes, and we worked together. And so finally we just decided, well, let's write this definitive book so that we can thrash out some of the contradictions and the misunderstandings. And so we started working on it. We did a first draft and an outline, and I think he got busy getting his tenure and full professorship at Vanderbilt, and I got busy doing the same thing at Tennessee State and creating the Department of Africana Studies. So once we got all our ducks lined up, he said, well, this will be our capstone activity. And we came back to this project, and we think that this is certainly, this particular book will be a defining moment for both of us. We see it as a capstone experience.
What do you say about this, Dr. Baldwin?
Dr. Al-Hadid has given you much of the story in terms of how we met in connection with the Great Debate Series. One of the things that we realized immediately, of course, is that we both come out of different faith traditions. And as you know, Malcolm was a Muslim and King a Christian. And we've noticed over the years the problems that often exist and the tensions that often exist between Christians and Muslims in the African American community. You often have a lot of competition. Both are proselytizing faiths, and self-righteousness, competition, other problems have often led to differences, fragmentation, tensions. And this book, we decided to write a book that would deal with Martin and Malcolm as sources of dialogue for Christians and Muslims around issues of culture and interfaith dialogue. So as Dr. Al-Hadid said, the book has been in the making, if I might use that terminology, for about 15, 16 years. Because we've debated, he's been to my class, I've been a part of the Great Debate Series, and out of that kind of collaboration, we decided to produce this study. So it's a product of 15 years of research and collaboration.
All dealing with the perspective of Malcolm and Martin in reference to just a whole variety of issues, I would imagine.
Exactly.
Well, now what kind of, and I'm sure you'll get into this later on, but what kind of initial problems you had in terms of bringing these views together, and how were these problems resolved?
Well, I think this is a great time for this book to come out, you know, in light of the things that are happening in the world today, with the tensions between the Christian West and the Islamic East, with African Americans rising to the occasion, calling for reparations, with the resurgence of white supremacy, and with the followers of Dr. King and Malik al-Shabazz now starting to realize that there has to be a central position. In the 60s, you see, they were put in juxtaposition to each other, diametrically opposed. In the Great Debate, we say that Dr. King represents the thesis of integration, assimilation, and then al-Shabazz represents the antithesis of nationalism and Pan-Africanism. And so when you put these two in tension, sometimes you miss the commonalities, which would be the creative synthesis. And what we're trying to do is to go through all of those apparent differences and to come out with some common themes and commonalities to show that these men were more alike than they were different.
Okay, and of course we'll allow the two of you to talk about those likenesses after this first commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this first commercial break. Between Cross and Crescent,